So the final section is on safety. We'll start by looking at road safety, then we'll talk about nights out, traveling, particularly in China, and what to do in emergencies. So road safety, I think this is a picture from Chongqing where they have a specially designated lane for people walking with their cell phones, and in another lane for people walking without cell phones. A lot of people are walking around these days with their faces glued into their cell phones. My advice is don't do this anywhere near a road. First question, are bikes safe? I mentioned before that you should only take a bicycle onto single lane roads. If you're going on roads that have 2 lanes in either direction, then you could be asked to get off the road and get onto the pavement. Also, cars don't treat bicycles on the road with a lot of respect. They don't give them a lot of space, and sometimes they just don't even realize that you're there. They're not expecting you to be there, and they're not looking out for you. So be very careful if you're going to ride a bike on a road in China. If you're anywhere near a road and you see a car or a bicycle or an electric bike or anything that could interact with you in some way, best expect the unexpected. Give them a wide berth, give them plenty of space, because they may not see you. And quite often, if you have certain expectations that you've brought with you from the West, that, oh, this vehicle is going to stop for me. Oh, this car will indicate before it turns. Oh, this car is indicating it's going to turn. Don't expect that to happen. Quite often cars will turn without indicating, and quite often cars will be indicating and then won't turn at all. So expect the unexpected and just get used to reading the situations in a different way. Zebra crossings. In the UK, a zebra crossing is really a hallowed, sacred location. If a pedestrian is anywhere near a zebra crossing, then cars will be getting ready to stop. In China, you may have already stepped onto a zebra crossing before a car gets anywhere near you, and they'll still drive straight across the zebra crossing as if you weren't there, forcing you to stop in the middle of the road. I don't know what the norms are in other countries, but that's happened to me so many times in China, and I can certainly remember the first time it happened to me, and it shocked me. But I learnt that, perhaps the rules are a little different on zebra crossings here, and also that whatever the rules are, people are going to do that anyway. So you have to just be prepared that if you see a zebra crossing, it doesn't necessarily mean that a car is going to stop. If you see a give way sign, it doesn't necessarily mean the car is going to stop. And here's another thing, again, maybe this is me being British, but cars will turn right at red lights. I mean, the equivalent in the UK would be cars turning left at red lights, but you can't do that in the UK. I think this is something that happens in the States. But yeah, you will have cars turning right at red lights, so be prepared for that. And actually, the safer way to deal with that situation is just not to expect cars to stop for lights in all situations. As I was saying, in general, Shenzhen is quite a good city in terms of driving, but you will get variation, especially if you go from the center of Shenzhen out to the outskirts. You're going to have less well-trained drivers, and you have a wide mixture of people of many different ages who've learnt to drive at many different times, so you're going to get varying levels of courtesy on the roads. If you go to other cities in China, you'll probably see that there is a difference in the standard of driving there as well. For example, I've been to Chengdu last year and thought, wow, the drivers in Chengdu really are like much more impatient than the drivers in Shenzhen. So be wary of that as well. Nights out. So fake alcohol, I've mentioned already. Know that it's out there. Sniff your drinks. Know what your drinks taste like. Look up certain tricks you can do with dropping water and things onto your drinks to see how the that alcohol separates and things like this. There are things you can do around that if you're concerned. Or you can, pick certain more expensive bars and restaurants and things where you're pretty sure where the alcohol is coming from. Get to know the guy who runs the bar. There are a few foreign run bars in Shenzhen where you can be pretty sure where the alcohol is coming from. There are even microbreweries where the guys are brewing the stuff themselves, so they would never serve you anything fake. Go out with your friends. It's important from a safety point of view that you take care of yourself. We don't want people getting isolated and then getting to some kind of altercation where, because of language difficulties, they don't have any backup, they don't really have any help, they don't really know how to get themselves out of the situation, and it can be pretty difficult when you don't speak the language. A lot of people in Shenzhen do speak English, but you shouldn't just expect it all of the time. So, always go out with friends and make sure you've got someone who's a dedicated driver, or someone who's going to keep an eye on everyone. Said it before when we talk about fake alcohol, know your limits. Just try to drink responsibly and within reasonable limits. And if you're going to have a big night out, have a plan. Have someone who's dedicated to making sure everyone gets home, and someone's going to look after you. And I guess another part of that, if you're having a big night out, think about your valuables. So there have really been quite a few cases of people losing their passports, losing their phones, losing their wallets, losing their bank cards on nights out, losing all of those things in one go because they have them in a bag. So be sensible. I've said before, you don't need to carry your passport everywhere you go. If there's good reason to leave it at home and take a photocopy with you, then do so. If you're going on a night out and you don't want to carry a lot of stuff with you, then leave your passport at home. Obviously, a lot of people pay for things with their mobile phones these days using stuff like WeChat and Alipay. So you may consider taking your mobile phone with you. Obviously, it's a lot easier to contact all of your friends, but perhaps leave your wallet and your bank card at home in that case, because you've got everything on your mobile phone that you need then. And don't forget school. So 5 nights out of every week are school nights. We certainly don't expect people to be turning up to school with a hangover. So this is definitely something that we'll be paying close attention to. Travel in China. So obviously a lot of people come to Shenzhen partly because they can travel all over China, but also because of the proximity to Southeast Asia. So it's a great opportunity to travel with all of the holidays that you get as a teacher. So really, in terms of health and safety more than anything, tell us your plans. So if you're traveling around China, or if you're traveling off into Southeast Asia, tell us where you're going to go, for the October holiday, for the Chinese New Year holiday. Tell us where you're going to go. Tell us a good way of getting in contact with you, and make sure that you know how to get in contact with us. So share contact details. One of the things we'll ask you to do as soon as you arrive, fill in your contracts, is to give us detailed next of kin contact information. So in the event that there is some sort of problem and some sort of challenge, we can help you out, and I'll cover how that can be really helpful in a little while. Don't trust your phones. So we put all of our contact details for friends, family, work colleagues, everything. We put it all into our phones. WeChat, everything's in WeChat, and mobile phone numbers in our address book. Then what happens? Our phone runs out of battery, or we lose it, and then we lose our contact with everybody. So have some kind of record of someone's contact details in writing of some form. I'll be encouraging all specialists to hand out their business cards to all of their foreign teachers, and anyone who wants a business card from me can certainly have one. And this way you could keep that with your passport, or you could keep that somewhere that's always going to be handy. If something goes wrong, you've lost your phone's run out of battery, you have a phone number you can call. You have someone you can contact. Travel with friends. A lot of people will like backpacking alone. I've done it myself, but I will always advise people to travel with friends. If something goes wrong, you've got someone with you. It can really, really help. And I'll go into another example, like I was saying, that really makes that point. So this last Chinese New Year, we had a couple of teachers who were traveling in Thailand. These two guys were working at the same school, and they decided to go traveling in Thailand together. And during their trip, they went on a motorbike ride. I think they rented some motorbikes, and one of them hit a pothole or a bump in the road, I think it was, flew off the bike and landed really badly on his shoulder and his head. He ended up with what must have been pretty severe concussion and a broken collarbone, and was taken to hospital, and his colleague from the same school ended up with him in the hospital trying to help him. I was alerted of this by the colleague who contacted me through WeChat, and I was actually on holiday in the UK at the time. So we had two teachers in Thailand, one of them with concussion and a broken collarbone, and one who was sitting there helping him, and me in the UK trying to coordinate between them and China to see what help we could provide. And the problems we were having were that this teacher couldn't remember his name, bashed his head so badly that he couldn't remember who he was. So there was no way to get hold of his family in America in order to get some kind of financial support to help pay for his treatment whilst he was in Thailand. What ended up happening was that I had to assist his friend and colleague by sending money through WeChat that he could then get hold of in Thailand to then pay for the treatment in Thailand. Now, that was a great result because it meant that he was able to go to a better hospital, get good treatment, eventually remembered who he was and got back to China, and everything was okay. But if it hadn't been for his friend being there with him and having a phone with the battery and having a way of contacting me, I'm not sure how else the situation would have been resolved. But hopefully the friend would have been able to find another way to do it. But if he hadn't been there at all, this teacher's there with no contact information for his next of kin, with amnesia, lying in a Thai hospital, who knows what could happen in that situation. So that's why we thoroughly advise you to travel with friends and to make sure that you always have a way of getting in touch with us and for us to get in touch with you. And if you take our business cards, you take information about our company, if you end up in that situation without someone there to help you, perhaps someone will find that business card and they think to call us. Okay, so on that note, in an emergency in China, the police number is 110. I'm told that the police are supposed to have an English language service. I'm also told that some foreigners have phoned 110 and failed to get hold of this English language service. However, I do believe that if you were to call this number and you were to speak a language other than Chinese, that the first thing they would think to do would be to get hold of someone who could speak English. And there are definitely people working for the police who speak very good English. So I believe it would only be a matter of time in an emergency before they would get hold of someone to help you. However, sometimes you don't have that time. Similarly, with the fire service and the ambulance, I would expect that they would take action to find someone who could speak English to help you. These are the numbers that you need. So police 110, fire 119, ambulance 120. And I'm sure you'll get these repeated to you multiple times once you get to China. They're very easy to find out, very easy to ask, but it's just worth knowing in advance. Other things to emphasize about emergency situations. Obviously, contact the emergency services, but contact us as well, because you want someone to chase up and explain the situation with the ambulance service or with the police to help you out and make sure that the best things possible are going on, and then we can get in contact with you and explain to you what's going on. Also, consider contacting your embassy. So I do encourage everybody to get contact details for their embassy. If they ever find themselves in an emergency situation, then they can get hold of the embassy, who can potentially help them in some way through communicating with Chinese services as well. If you find yourself in an emergency situation and it's not a situation that looks like being resolved very quickly, then make sure you preserve your phone battery. You don't want to waste your phone battery on phone calls to lots of different people when perhaps the most important thing is that you make a phone call to the police or to us so that we can help you out. An example of this situation, it sounds pretty innocuous at first. We had some teachers who went hiking on a Sunday afternoon. They took a bus out of Shenzhen to a more rural area, and on their way there they took the advice of a lady at a bus stop who said, "Oh, you don't want to take that bus, you want to take this bus." And they ended up trying to get to the hiking trail they were looking for from the wrong side of the hill because they took the wrong bus. They never found the hiking trail, and at 5 or 6 in the afternoon, as the sun started to come down, they started to contact people like me and their specialist to say, "Hey, we're lost, we're on a hill, we're in the middle of nowhere, there's no one here, and this feels like it's turning into an emergency. What do we do?" In the end, the police were alerted, and I headed out to the part of Shenzhen that they were lost in and waited for them at the police station, and eventually the police services were able to find them on the hill. I think it was around 11 p.m. that night. Their phones had almost run out of battery, and they were pretty cold and pretty shocked by the whole situation, but they were brought back to the police station and I was able to take them back into Shenzhen. But that's a good example of how, just simply getting lost can actually turn into an emergency. If you don't have the time or the ability to contact someone quickly enough to come and solve the problem, you find yourself stuck on a hill somewhere. That's when the battery on your phone is going to become particularly important. As it was, they did exactly the right thing in the situation. They contacted us and they made sure that the police were alerted, and they were together as a group of friends, so they were able to look after each other, and it all turned out fine in the end. Okay, so that pretty much sums up health and safety in China. Our next video is going to be about cultural challenges.